The air above Blackwater Lake looked calm that afternoon. Too calm. No waves, no wind, no sound except the soft scrape of a kayak sliding off the shore. Imagine this: a young woman in her early 20s, alone, pushing her bright red kayak into water that looks like glass. No lifeguards, no other boats nearby, just endless silent water and a storm the weather app didn't mention. Her name is Emily. Before we begin, if you're listening to this, turn down the lights, put your phone on silent, and imagine you are sitting in that kayak. Because tonight's story isn't just about fear. It's about what happens when nature, darkness, and your own mind all turn against you at once, and you still survive. It started out harmless, like any other weekend trip. Emily had driven 3 hours out of the city to get away, from emails, from group chats, from the constant buzz of life. Blackwater Lake was supposed to be quiet, peaceful, a place people came to fish, camp, and post those nature reset pictures on Instagram. The ranger station at the entrance looked old, like it had been there since the 70s. Faded red paint, a porch with creaking wood,
Yes,
and a
it's right
big
here.
corkboard
And be
covered in
careful on the
missing
trail, it's rough
posters,
up there.
safety flyers,
thank you.
and a map of the lake. Emily walked in, sunglasses still on,
We have reports
phone
of
in her
suspicious
hand.
activity near the
A
North Ridge
middle-aged
Trail.
park
You
ranger
need to
behind the
proceed with
desk
caution.
glanced up.
Copy that.
His name tag
Be
read
careful out there.
D. Miller. Afternoon. Here for camping or just the lake? Just the lake. I'm renting a kayak. Maybe a few hours. It looks pretty calm out there. Miller didn't smile. He looked past her to the door, like he was checking the sky behind her. Calm doesn't always mean safe. Weather's been acting weird here this week. Wind comes out of nowhere. You got a life jacket? Yeah, she said quickly, shifting her backpack. I'll be fine. He slid a clipboard across the counter. Sign here, emergency contact, car plate, you know the drill. As she filled it out, something on the corkboard caught her eye. A black and white picture of a man in his 30s, with the word missing in bold above his head. Someone got lost? She asked, nodding toward it. Miller followed her eyes, but didn't move his head. Couple years ago. Solo kayaker. Storm rolled in. We found his gear, not him. Emily hesitated, pen hovering over the paper. On this lake? She asked. Yeah. Miller's voice was flat, like he repeated this story often. Blackwater doesn't forgive carelessness.
You
Stay
can't
close
just
to the
wander
shoreline.
off.
Don't go
This is the
past the
Blackwater
point.
Trail, but
He
you
tapped
must
a spot
stick
on the map.
to this path
A long
right here.
arm of land that reached out into the lake like a finger. After that, it gets deep. Wind tunnels through there. She swallowed. Got it. I'll just go out a bit, take some photos, maybe relax. I'll be back before sunset. Miller slid a bright
You need to
orange
be
whistle
careful out
across the
there. The
counter.
trails aren't safe right now.
Take this.
Did you
Storm
remember to
comes
lock
in
the cabin?
fast at dusk.
Yes,
If you
I
get in
double-checked the
trouble,
latch.
blow 3 times. I can't promise I'll hear you, but it's better than screaming at the trees. Thanks. I'll be fine. Everyone says that before something goes wrong. The sun was still high when Emily dragged the kayak down the rocky shore and into the water. The lake reflected the sky so perfectly it felt like she was stepping into a mirror. She climbed in, wobbling a bit, and sat down. The kayak rocked beneath her, but she found her balance. The paddle dipped into the water with a soft splash, sending little ripples out in circles. This is what I wanted, she thought. Silence. No notifications, no people. Trees lined the edge of the lake. Tall pines and oaks leaning over the water, casting dark green reflections. Somewhere far away, a bird called, but other than that, the world seemed muted, like someone had turned the volume down. She paddled away from the shore, each stroke taking her further from the car, the ranger, and the safety of solid ground. At first, nothing felt strange. The air was a pleasant cool, the kind that made you breathe deeper. The sky had a few thin clouds, but they drifted lazily, harmless. Emily took her phone out of the dry pouch hanging from her neck. She snapped a selfie. Kayak, life jacket, sunglasses, lake behind her, a perfect shot for later. She checked the time. Plenty of daylight. She turned on some music low, just enough to keep her company. Then she started paddling toward the center. Minutes turned into half an hour. The shore shrank behind her. The trees looked like a painted line now, distant and almost fake. That's when the first thing went wrong. Her music cut off. She frowned, tapped her screen. The playlist showed an error. Then her screen flickered. Bars of signal disappeared one by one. No service. Seriously? She muttered. Already? She tried to reload. Nothing. Just a gray screen and a spinning circle. She looked up at the sky. The clouds weren't thin anymore. Somewhere, behind the hills, something darker was rolling in. She shrugged it off. It's fine. Just clouds. I'll head back in a bit. She didn't notice the wind yet. Because it didn't start with wind. It started with the silence. The birds stopped. No wings, no calls, nothing rustling in the trees. Even the soft little waves her paddle made seemed to die faster, like the lake was swallowing them. Emily paused mid-stroke, listening. There was only the sound of her own breathing. A small chill crept up her spine. She dipped the paddle again and turned the kayak, deciding to start heading back toward the shore. It was easy, one simple turn. But when she looked around, something felt off. The shoreline didn't look familiar. It was just trees, endless trees. No dock, no ranger station, no cars. She squinted. Did I drift farther than I thought? She pulled the paddle through the water faster now, trying to aim for the land. Just get back to shore, doesn't matter where. She could walk the edge back to the main area. The kayak moved, but it felt harder now, like every stroke met more resistance. And then she felt it. A cold breeze brushed the back of her neck. She looked behind her. The surface of the lake, which had been smooth like glass, now had small ripples. In the distance, she could see a darker patch of water, like something stirring underneath. The clouds above had thickened into dark gray shapes, slowly swallowing the sun, but it wasn't just getting darker, it was getting colder. She shivered and kept paddling. That's when the second thing went wrong. Her paddle hit something. There was a heavy thunk under the water, and the kayak shook so hard she almost dropped the paddle. Whoa! Her heart jumped. She looked down, but the water was too dark to see anything beneath the surface. It wasn't clear blue, it was almost black. Blackwater Lake. She tried again, more carefully, steering around where she'd felt the impact. Another thud. This time, the kayak lurched, tipping hard to the left. Her hand slipped, the paddle slid away. In 1 second, she was off balance. In the next, the world flipped. The cold hit her like a slap. The lake swallowed her whole. The water was freezing. It shot up her nose, into her lungs, in her ears. Everything was muffled, blue-black and spinning. She kicked, panicking, arms flailing blindly, trying to remember which way was up. Her chest burned, her eyes stayed shut against the sting. Finally, she broke the surface, gasping, coughing, grabbing for anything. Her fingers brushed plastic. The kayak had turned halfway upside down, one side still visible. She grabbed it desperately, clinging to it as she kicked to stay afloat. Okay, she panted to herself, trying not to cry. Okay, okay. Don't panic. You're fine. You're okay. Her phone. She looked down. The pouch around her neck was there, but water had leaked in around the zipper. The phone screen flickered behind the plastic. She pressed the power button through the case. Black. Come on, she whispered. Not now, please. Nothing. The wind picked up more, pushing small waves against the side of the kayak, rocking it. The sky above was now a flat gray sheet, darkening at the edges. Thunder rumbled somewhere far away. Emily took a breath and forced herself to think. I have a life jacket. I'm not sinking. I have the kayak. I can get back to shore. Just pick a direction and go. She wrapped one arm over the kayak and started kicking toward the nearest visible tree line. The lake did not want her to move. It felt like every wave pushed her sideways. The kayak kept twisting, spinning, trying to slip away from her grip. She adjusted, kicking harder, arms aching, legs burning. Her teeth started to chatter. Time became strange out there. Minutes stretched like hours. She had no idea how long she'd been in the water, only that her muscles screamed and her fingers were starting to go numb. At some point, the shore finally started to get closer. Branches became shapes. Trees got thicker. The colors of bark and leaves became clearer. She could see a break in the trees, a small cove, maybe, or a crude dock. Come on, she whispered. Come on, come on. The wind shoved at her back, almost helping now, pushing her toward land. Then lightning flashed, splitting the sky into white and violet. Thunder cracked a second later, so loud she flinched. Rain followed. Not gentle drops, hard, cold needles slamming down from above, flattening the water, making it look like boiling metal. She squinted through the rain. There, a shadow of something wooden sticking out from the water. A dock. Or what used to be one. Emily stumbled out of the lake, half dragging, half pushing the kayak onto the muddy ground. Her legs felt like jelly. Her clothes clung to her skin, dripping. She collapsed on her hands and knees, coughing, then rolled over onto her back, staring up at the dark, churning sky. The rain hit her face. Her hair stuck to her cheeks. Her chest heaved. For a moment, she just lay there, listening to the storm, feeling the ground under her, a reminder that she wasn't floating anymore. She forced herself to sit up. The dock she'd seen was barely standing. Half of it was underwater, the wood gray and splintered. Rusted nails stuck out in jagged lines. It looked like no one had used it for years. Beyond it, up a small slope, was a clearing. And in that clearing, a cabin. It stood crooked, its porch sagging, the windows dark. The roof looked patched with mismatched shingles. The door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. No lights, no smoke from a chimney, no car, no sign of life. Someone has to be there, Emily whispered to herself. A cabin means somebody. She grabbed the kayak rope, dragged it further onto land so it wouldn't slide back in, then started up the hill, shoes sinking into the wet earth. Each step squished. Mud clung to her sneakers. Her muscles protested with every movement. By the time she reached the porch, she was shaking from cold and exhaustion. She raised her hand to knock on the door. Her knuckles hovered an inch away. Something about the cabin felt wrong. Not just old, not just abandoned. Empty, but not forgotten. The wood was weathered, yet the porch had no leaves on it, no branches, as if someone had swept it recently. The door, though crooked, had a shiny lock. A metal lantern hung beside it, newer than everything else. She almost turned away. Then thunder boomed again, and a gust of wind blew a spray of rain onto her face. "Screw it," she said, and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, louder. "Hello?" she shouted over the storm. "I need help. I capsized." Silence. She tried the handle. It turned. The door creaked open. Inside, the air smelled like dust, damp wood, and something faintly metallic. Maybe old tools, maybe old blood. The thought slewed into her mind before she could stop it. She stepped in slowly, 1 foot at a time. "Hello?" No one answered. The main room was small. A table, 2 chairs, a wood stove, cold and unused, shelves with jars, some empty, some filled with things she couldn't identify, a sink with no dishes. In one corner, a narrow bed with a thin mattress and a gray blanket folded neatly. Beside it, a small dresser. On top of the dresser, a lantern. Next to the lantern, an old, weathered life jacket. She walked over, breath shallow. She picked up the life jacket. It was faded orange, stained. A small label on the inside collar had a name written in black marker, barely legible. She squinted. Mark H. Her chest tightened. Solo kayaker. We found his gear, not him. The ranger's voice echoed in her memory. Emily put the life jacket down carefully, as if it might wake someone. Her eyes fell on something else on the dresser, a small black object, a recorder. She hesitated, then picked it up. Her fingers trembled. She wasn't sure if it was from the cold or something else now. There was a single button labeled play. "No," she whispered. "I shouldn't." But the storm pounded on the roof, the wind howled around the cabin, thunder rattled the glass in the windows. She pressed it. For a moment, there was only static. Then a man's voice, shaky and tight with fear. "If someone finds this, my name is Mark. I don't know what day it is anymore. The lake, it's wrong. The weather, it changes too fast." I tried to paddle back. Every time I think I'm close to the dock, I end up somewhere else, like the shoreline keeps moving. I keep hearing voices on the water at night. I thought it was other boats. It's not. There's no boats, just whispers. Emily's hand tightened on the recorder. Thunder rolled again, closer this time. Mark's voice continued, softer now. "I came to clear my head, just needed some quiet. But out there, quiet feels like the lake is listening. If you're hearing this and you're alone, don't go back on the water at night. Wait for sunrise. Whatever it is out there, it doesn't like daylight." Static. Then the recording stopped. Emily stared at the wall. She could hear her heart beating in her ears. "Okay," she whispered. "So I stay here. I wait. It's fine. It's just a creepy old recording. People get lost, that's all." The wind screamed against the cabin like something was trying to push its way in. She set the recorder down. The room suddenly felt smaller. She moved to the window and wiped the fog off the glass with her sleeve. Outside, the lake was nearly black, the rain turning its surface into chaos. Lightning flashed, and for a split second, she thought she saw something on the water. Something long and low, like a boat. No, not a boat. A shape. Drifting. When the lightning stopped, it vanished. She took a step back. "Just shadows," she told herself. "Just your brain. You're exhausted. You're cold. You fell in a lake. Nobody thinks clearly after that." She scanned the cabin for anything useful. In the small kitchen area, she found a box of matches, slightly damp but still usable, and a half-full bottle of water. In a drawer, an old flashlight that flickered but worked. She lit the lantern, its glow pushing back the worst of the shadows. With shaking hands, she peeled off her soaked jacket and wrung out her sleeves as best she could. She wrapped herself in the thin blanket from the bed, sitting on the edge, feet on the wooden floor. The wind rattled the windows again. Then she heard it. A sound that wasn't wind, wasn't thunder, wasn't rain. A single clear tap on the window. She froze. The lantern flame flickered. Tap, 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 like knuckles. Gently, patient, polite. Her mouth went dry. Slowly, very slowly, she turned her head toward the window. There was nothing there, just the dark outside, streaked with lines of rain. Tap, tap. This time it was from the other window. Her stomach dropped. Branches, she thought. Just branches hitting the glass, that's all. Tree branches in the storm. Except she hadn't seen any trees that close to the cabin. The clearing around it had been open grass and mud. The tapping stopped. For a moment, the only sound was her breathing. Then, from somewhere down by the lake, faint but unmistakable, a whistle. 3 sharp blasts, exactly like the ranger had given her. Emily's blood turned to ice. She stood up, blanket dropping to the floor. The whistle sounded again. 3 times. Closer now. Her first thought was relief. Someone's here. Someone's looking. Maybe it's the ranger. Maybe he noticed my car didn't move, that I didn't come back. Her second thought came right after. How did they get here so fast? In this storm? She grabbed the flashlight and went to the door. Her hand shook as she reached for the knob. The whistle came again, but this time, between the blasts, she thought she heard something else, like words, muffled by rain, echoing off the lake. Hello? Here? Anyone? She swallowed hard, her heart hammering in her chest. Hello? She shouted, yanking the door open. I'm here, up by the cabin. The storm hit her full force, wind slamming into her wet clothes, rain stinging her face. The flashlight beam cut through the dark in a narrow cone. She swept it across the hill, across the broken dock, across the lake. Nothing. No boat, no ranger, no light but hers. Then far out on the lake, the beam caught something. A small, bobbing speck of orange. A life jacket. Not on anyone, just floating. The whistle blew again, but this time, between the blasts, she thought she heard something else, like words, muffled by rain, echoing off the lake. Hello? Here? Anyone? She swallowed hard, her heart hammering in her chest. Hello? She shouted, yanking the door open. I'm here, up by the cabin. The storm hit her full force, wind slamming into her wet clothes, rain stinging her face. The flashlight beam cut through the dark in a narrow cone. She swept it across the hill, across the broken dock, across the lake. Nothing. No boat, no ranger, no light but hers. Then far out on the lake, the beam caught something. A small, bobbing speck of orange. A life jacket. Not on anyone, just floating. The whistle blew again, but this time, between the blasts, she thought she heard something else, like words, muffled by rain, echoing off the lake. Hello? Here? Anyone? She swallowed hard, her heart hammering in her chest. Hello? She shouted. She spun around, shining the light wildly. Who's there? The beam hit the trees at the edge of the clearing. They stood still. Too still. No movement in the branches, no shaking leaves despite the wind. The whistle stopped. And the storm impossibly got quieter, just for a moment, like it was waiting. Emily backed into the cabin and slammed the door shut, chest heaving. What is happening? She whispered. What is happening? What is happening? She leaned her back against the door, slid down, and sat on the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. For the first time since she'd capsized, tears stung her eyes. "I don't want to die here," she said softly. "I didn't come here to die." The lantern flickered again, then steadied. She forced herself to breathe slower. In, out. In, out. Think. Don't panic. Panic makes people stupid. She remembered something from a podcast she'd listened to about survival. People who live don't wait passively. They pay attention. They act. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. "Okay," she said aloud, as if talking to someone. "If this is just weather and weird echoes, I wait until morning. If this is something else, it can't own the whole world. Sunrise is still real." She got up and checked the door's lock. It was old but solid. She pushed a chair under the handle anyway, bracing it. She lay down on the bed, still in her damp clothes, pulling the blanket over herself. The lantern stayed on, its light turning the shadows into softer shapes. The storm continued outside, but eventually exhaustion overpowered fear. Her eyes closed. The night stretched on. She wasn't sure what woke her. Was it the silence? The way the thunder had faded? The rain softened? Or was it the feeling that she wasn't alone in the room anymore? Her eyes snapped open. The lantern was still burning, but lower now, the flame smaller. The shadows on the walls seemed longer. For a moment, everything looked normal. Just the cabin, the dresser, the door with the chair under the handle. Then she heard it. A soft, wet sound. Drip, drip, drip. Like water falling onto old wood. She slowly turned her head toward the sound. In the middle of the floor, near the table, there was a small puddle forming. Water dripping from somewhere above, splashing into it. She looked up. The ceiling had a dark stain, growing slowly, water seeping through. But that wasn't what made her sit up. Right next to the puddle, 2 wet footprints had appeared on the floor. Bare footprints, as if someone had just stepped out of the lake and walked inside. They led from the center of the room toward the dresser, then disappeared. Emily's heart pounded in her throat. No, 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 no. She grabbed the flashlight with shaking hands and shined it across the floor. The prints were still there. Clear. Dripping. She pointed the beam at the door. The chair was still braced. The lock still turned. The door hadn't opened. Her breathing quickened. "Okay, you're dreaming. This is like when you wake up, but your brain's still weird. It's nothing. It's..." The recorder on the dresser clicked. She froze. It clicked again as if someone had pressed a button. Then, without her touching it, the same man's voice filled the room once more. "If someone finds this..." Her skin crawled. She hadn't rewound it. She hadn't touched it since the first time. The voice continued, but the words were slightly different now. "If someone finds this, don't follow the whistle. It's not help, it's the lake. It wants you back in the water. Don't follow the footsteps. Don't look at the window when you hear tapping. Just wait for morning. That's the only time I feel like myself." Static hissed. Then, very softly, the voice whispered, almost too low to hear, "I didn't listen." The recorder shut off with a sharp click. Emily stared at it, every muscle in her body tense. Slowly, she moved her gaze to the window. Tap, tap, tap. This time, she didn't look. She squeezed her eyes shut, gripping the blanket so hard her knuckles hurt. Outside, something dragged across the wall of the cabin with a low, scraping sound, like fingers, like nails, like someone circling the building, feeling along the wood. She stayed frozen, breathing shallowly, heart beating wild and off rhythm. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time felt like the inside of a nightmare, looping and stretching. At some point, the tapping stopped. The scraping faded. The whistle did not sound again. Exhaustion dragged at her limbs. She focused on the sound of her own breathing, on the faint warmth of the lantern, on one thought. Morning. Just make it to morning. When light finally began to creep through the edges of the curtains, it didn't feel real. At first, Emily thought she was imagining it. The gray softening to pale, the lantern's glow fading next to something cooler, gentler. She slowly opened her eyes. The puddle on the floor had dried to a faint stain. The footprints were gone. The recorder lay where she'd left it, silent. Outside, the storm was over. No rain, no thunder, no howling wind. Just the distant call of a bird and the quiet lap of water against the shore. Her body ached. Her throat felt raw. But she was alive. She sat up carefully, half expecting something to grab her ankle from under the bed. Nothing did. She stood, legs shaky, and went to the window. The lake lay still and flat, a pale gray mirror reflecting the morning sky. Mist clung to its surface in thin, moving ribbons. The dock was still broken. The trees were still there. Everything looked a little less sinister in daylight. She unlocked the door, moved the chair away, and stepped onto the porch. Cold air washed over her, but it wasn't hostile anymore, just clean and damp, smelling of wet earth and pine. She could see her kayak down by the shore, right where she'd dragged it. It hadn't moved. Far off, across the water, she thought she saw the glint of something metal. A roof. Maybe the ranger station. Maybe a small marina. It looked reachable. She took a deep breath. "I'm not staying here," she said aloud, as if answering some unspoken question. "I'm not disappearing like Mark." Back inside, she grabbed the whistle the ranger had given her. It was still clipped to her life jacket. She also took the matches, the flashlight, and the half-empty bottle of water. For a moment, she considered taking the recorder. She left it. Some stories were better left in the cabin. Down by the shore, she flipped the kayak upright, checked it for major cracks. A large scrape ran along one side where it had hit something under the water, but it was still seaworthy. She pushed it into the lake, heart pounding, but this time the fear felt cleaner, sharper, controlled. "I know what you are now," she murmured to the water. "You're a dangerous, but you're not a ghost. You're a lake." She climbed in and sat carefully. The paddle felt heavier in her hands, but it was still hers. She aimed the kayak toward where she'd seen the flash of metal, the faint suggestion of buildings through the morning mist. Then she started to paddle. The lake resisted at first, small ripples pushing back. Her arms burned almost immediately, but she kept going. Each stroke was a decision. Move. Don't stop. Don't look back. She didn't listen for whistles. She didn't look at the water's surface for shapes. She focused on one thing, the shore ahead. The journey that had felt endless the night before, in darkness and storm, slowly shrank in the light. After what felt like half an hour, but might have been less, she heard something. Not wind, not thunder, a motor. She looked up. A small ranger boat was heading toward her from the far side of the lake, its engine humming steadily. A figure stood at the front, hand over his eyes, squinting. Ranger Miller. Emily's throat tightened. She raised the paddle and waved it over her head and shouted, "Hey, over here!" The boat turned slightly, angling toward her. As it drew closer, she could see the concern on his face. "You're one stubborn kid. Didn't I tell you to stay near the shore?" She let out a shaky laugh that was half a sob. "Yeah, you did. Sorry, I got lost." When the boat pulled alongside her, he reached out a hand. "We had a storm warning go off last night. Saw your car still in the lot, no return sign-in. I've been out here since sunrise." He paused, eyes narrowing. "Where did you spend the night?" Emily glanced back over her shoulder. From here in the daylight, the small cove and the hill where the cabin stood were barely visible, a smudge of darker green among the trees. "There's a cabin over there," she said slowly. "Old, but still standing. Someone stayed there before, Mark. He left a recorder." His expression changed. He closed. "No one lives on that side of the lake," he said flatly. "Those old cabins were condemned years ago. We put up no trespassing signs." "I didn't see any signs," she said softly. "Just the dock and the footprints. And..." She stopped. Maybe it didn't matter right now. Miller looked at her for a long moment. "Whatever you saw," he said, his voice quieter now, "you're lucky to be alive. This place, it takes people who don't respect it." He helped her into the boat, securing her kayak with a rope. As they headed back toward the ranger station, Emily watched the cabin's hills slowly shrink behind them, swallowed by trees and distance and mist. For a second, just a second, she thought she saw someone standing on the porch. A man, barefoot, dripping, watching them leave. She blinked. The porch was empty. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Days later, back in the city, safe in her small apartment with its humming fridge and warm lamps and noisy neighbors, the lake sometimes came back to her in dreams. The capsizing, the cabin, the tapping on the glass. In the dreams, the recorder always plays a little differently. "Don't follow the whistle," Mark warns. "Don't listen to the lake when it pretends to sound like you." She always wakes up then, heart racing, covers tangled. Sometimes, when her friends invite her out again, "Let's go paddleboarding, let's rent a boat, let's go somewhere with water," she smiles and shakes her head. Maybe another time. But one thing changed forever. She no longer thinks of nature as just a backdrop for photos, or lakes as smooth, pretty mirrors for sunsets. She knows now that water has moods, that silence has teeth, that fear, when it comes, is not always the enemy. Sometimes it's the thing that keeps you alive. And deep down, in a place she doesn't talk about, she knows this. She went into Blackwater Lake unprepared. The lake tried to claim her, but she came back. Not because she was stronger than it, but because when it whispered, she finally stopped listening. That's the night she truly learned how thin the line is between adventure and disaster, between calm water and a killer storm, between a fun story you tell your friends and the last story anyone ever tells about you. And that is why they still call it Kayak into the Dark, the lake survival.